Good morning and welcome. I'm so glad that you guys have decided to join us on this conversation of scaling trust and building governance systems that match AI evolutions. As AI is evolving, and especially as enterprise adoption is accelerating, companies are challenged with building governance systems that are adaptable, trusted, and that don't slow down innovation. And that's exactly what today's panel is going to discuss. But before we dive in, I do want to disclaim that everyone's opinions and commentary is their own and not representative of their companies. All right, so let's dive in. I think before we get started, I would love if you guys can maybe take 30 seconds, share a little bit about your background and your current role, especially how it relates to AI governance. Julia?
Sure, I'll start. Good morning. Very nice to be here. So thank you for the invitation. My name is Julia Nobre, and I'm currently part of ADP. My role currently is to scale Gen AI at ADP. So we look at enterprise-wide Gen AI use cases, and we take a strategic approach to that. So I work with governance team, privacy teams, and legal teams, and make sure that we can scale Gen AI at ADP.
Susan?
Thanks, Julia. I'm Susan Laine, and I work for Quest, and I'm the CTO of our data product line. I work with global customers on their data management and their AI initiatives, their AI and analytical initiatives. And I just have a very large background in data management, data intelligence, data governance, etc. And happy to be here with you all today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nick Yatsky. I'm the former Chief AI Officer for Wellstar Health System, Wellstar being one of the largest healthcare providers here in Georgia. Before Wellstar, I was the SVP of Engineering at ShareCare, a startup where we were tackling automating digital therapeutics, automating engagement, working with patients, and doing just automation across the board for everything. But my background is I'm an engineer, Georgia Tech. Any jackets here?
Yeah. Yep.
There we go. So bachelor's, master's, Georgia Tech, computer science, focused on artificial intelligence. I've been doing AI data for over 20 years now. So really thrilled to be here on this panel with my fellow panel mates.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun.
Thank you. I guess I made a rookie mistake and I should have introduced myself also so you know why I'm asking the questions. I'm Selma. I lead global data and analytics and strategy at Carter's. And I think really what you're gonna see throughout the panel is that almost every data role requires data governance. And so you innately are going to become a data steward of that data governance at your organization. So I love that everybody has such a variety, like a different background. Let's dive into some questions. I would love to hear kind of what's the biggest disconnect that you guys are seeing between traditional data governance practices and then how we need to kind of scale for AI-driven systems. I feel like now everything that we have within Carter's, and I'm sure across companies, has some component of AI. And I think that brings on new challenges. So Nick, I'd love to hear from you first.
Yeah, so when I think about data governance in general, I think we're all very used to the traditional data governance for reports, for dashboards, for things that can extract data, cleaning data, making sure it's all good to go. When you're dealing with AI, you kind of have two sides of the equation that go beyond that. One is on the training side, when you're able to and have the time to go in and clean up your data. But then when you're dealing with inference, when you're executing AI, you've got to be able to account for the data that's coming in. And so I think what a lot of people struggle with is they'll spend all this time cleaning the data through their data governance programs as they go into AI. And by the time they try and test it, they go, well, I've got bad data coming in. I don't know what to do with it anymore. And so your traditional data governance is really, really good at getting background processes done to get you reports. With AI side, you need to be able to account for bad things that are in that data, regardless of the interaction itself with the AI system, because you're going to have bad data no matter what, and you have to account for it. The last piece I would say is one additional thing that I usually don't see enough of when you're dealing with the more the current buzzword, agentic AI, right, is contextualizing the data itself. People think, well, I've got a clean data set, it's amazing, and I'll just use the agentic systems and Gen AI to inquire about the data, and it'll give me all these great results. And then you're seeing bad results going, I don't understand why. Well, just because you have clean data doesn't mean that there's context to explain what that data really is in a way that the Gen AI systems, the agentic systems can actually interpret it, can actually understand that there's relationships beyond table references, right? It's contextualizing the individual columns, individual fields. What do they actually mean so that the generative systems can connect the dots between them?
Yeah, 100%. Before, I do want to kind of add a little bit of context there too. I think with the evolution of AI and how data governance needs to scale there's so much now importance built into the semantics, where I feel like previously companies were like, oh, we don't really need to worry about that. And I think, again, innately, AI governance, data governance becomes such a key integral part of scaling AI at companies. Susan, what about you?
Yeah, so a couple things. Our clients are coming to us and they're saying, we can't keep up with the pace of AI. Our clients are skipping the metadata, they're skipping the governance, they're skipping the data modeling pieces, and they're like, please help us. And what we see is that we still have the traditional groups of your data modelers are over here, your business analysts are over here, your stewards are over here. So we're just as siloed in our domains behind data management as we are as a team across the organization. And what AI is doing is bringing all those different best practices together. And if you get out of those functional domains and start working together with AI, you're able to do all of those things and keep pace. So what the vendors are doing is they're embedding trust models into your catalogs. They're giving you, one of our latest releases was the autonomous data product, where you're doing a Gen AI experience of creating that logical model first, finding all the relevant physical information behind it, and then putting the guardrails around it, packaging it up as one data product. So that's one use case that goes out to each one of those disciplines and ensures that that's embedded in that new AI model. So a lot of cool stuff like that is happening. So using AI for AI is something that's needed.
I love that. AI for AI. Take note, guys. Julia, what do you think?
For sure. So I'll tell you from a perspective of a company that has a lot of data. So we've always had a large data set, and we consider ourselves in part a data company. And it was always about the static data, right? Right now, it's a data in motion. So as we have very complex use cases, we have agents. We have agents that act autonomously. So we've had to really rethink our strategy for data, and it has to be policy-driven governance. Mm-hmm. So it has to be role-based controls, access-based controls, and really rethinking about how we move forward, because the world has changed for us. So it's exciting, but I think that also opens up, new partnerships, new things, and of course for us, new opportunities to offer different products and experiences for our clients.
Yeah, 100%. I think too, with like the evolution of AI, we've really democratized data and analytics, which could open up the floodgates. And that's why I think governance is so vital in embedding some of those guardrails, which leads me to my next question. And I think, Susan, you said that you could talk about this all day. But how do you define and measure trusted data in your organization, especially when AI models are a part of the loop? How do you ensure that they can be trusted?
Right. So for a long time, it was always the data quality analysis that was giving us how good or bad the data is, right? Profiling the data, understanding if it made the threshold of integrity that you've set as an organization around your data. But that didn't incorporate things like, well, is that data even being used? And is it liked? So what we've done is embedded a trust model based off of 9 different facets, where our clients can decide which facets they want to put the strongest weight on. So which facets they want to use and how much weight to put on it. And then as it's being cataloged, it's being scored and classified into gold, silver, and bronze data sets and data products. So, and those facets are things like, it definitely does take into consideration how good or bad the data is from the profiling results. But it's also things like end user likes, and how well used is this data. Has this data been curated? Does it have good business policies and definitions around it? So there's 9 different facets. People are kind of getting towards monetization as well with the data trust scores, and starting to monetize all the great work that they're doing as they're redistributing it across the organization, which is kind of fun as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And then something that you said that really kind of clicked in my head is how adoption signals like whether or not the data is trustworthy. And I'm sure that a lot of us are tracking adoption right across our enterprise. Are people using the things that we're building? Are they using the data? And that can actually be a real signal to you, is the data trustworthy? Are the models trustworthy? So I love that. Okay, so I think as we talk, something that I've noticed too is that governance is innately a people role, right? Like it's all about making sure that people are being responsible with the data, that we're using in a way that is responsible, compliant, and all of those things. So I want to hear from you guys, and maybe Julia, you can share a little bit about how your team embeds effective governance into fast-moving AI-powered workflows. And especially, I feel like there's this key nuance here too of like, how do you do it without slowing down delivery and innovation?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So for us, it's been a journey, and I think we've really incorporated a different mindset, as I've said several times. So for us, number one thing is governance by design, and I think that's the only way that you can actually scale some of these use cases. So we think about it differently. We think about having clear directions for our developers. We think about automated TVE. We think about actually having this proactive monitoring in lower environments. And for having this, this mindset, I think it really helps us to build this. To build this infrastructure to actually make sure that we can scale. And the thing is that having governance by design, sometimes people think that it's a blocker. We actually think it's the opposite, because that is a safe way for us to grow. And again, it's a change of mindset. I'll tell a little bit later in the questions that we have of how we've structured teams for that. But definitely, I think for us, it's number one thing.
Ooh, I love that teaser. Nick, what about you guys? How are you guys embedding governance in your teams?
So the first thing I would say is I think of AI governance as a non-IT responsibility. And what I mean by that is when you're dealing with, say, third-party models or third-party solutions that are AI solutions that are coming into your organization, is it IT that looks at them and decides, yeah, let's go ahead and go with that? Or is it the business? And so when I build AI governance teams, I like to think of kind of 2 tiers of governance in that space. You have a center of excellence that's more of an operational group, and then you have executive leadership. And the role of executive leadership there is to define policy, define guidance, define directionality of where you're headed, but they're not actively making decisions on a case-by-case basis, right? Mm-hmm. They're looking at the larger picture of where we're trying to get to with things. And the vast majority of that should be your core key business executives. Within the operations team, also, you don't really want more than 15, 20% of that to be IT folks. You want privacy, policy, compliance, legal, your business enterprises, whatever business you're in. Every single vertical needs to have some skin in the game. Because the reality of AI solutions that are coming in is they start to become far more cross-cutting than some of the more traditional solutions are. They are far more robust in many situations. And you don't want IT being the one that's saying, well, we have to have this one. Well, there's 5 different options today, and tomorrow there'll be 20 different options for the same exact goal. But the business needs to be the one that owns it, the one that really expands the adoption within the organization. Because if it's IT is not going to get there. But what you said about monitoring and validating, those are absolutely crucial key things. Some of it lends itself from your standard SDLC, right? Anytime you put a production application out there, if you're not monitoring it, things are going to go bad. There's no doubt about it. But additional layers of monitoring and action on results needs to happen as well with a lot of these AI things, especially when you're monitoring prompts, when you're monitoring some of the more Gen AI concepts, when you're monitoring conversations between agents, where it's a single agent, it's one thing. When you have multiple agents, a swarm of agents, you have to monitor more. You have to be more proactive about these things. You have to catch these things and act quickly on them. or else things start to degrade very, very quickly.
Can I compliment you on one of the other things you said? So I love the fact that you said that governance is not only IT. And one of the things that we do for corporate use cases and just for everything that has to do with Gen AI use case submission, we actually have a field that asks the business about the governance and asks, what are you proposing will be the governance as part of the infrastructure. So I think that's definitely, again, it's not just the IT that needs to do that. We're living in a new world, so we all need to think about it for the business.
Exactly.
I think another new practice that's coming out of all of this too is doing risk assessments on your AI model. A lot of folks are doing that more proactively today, going out and ensuring that they're understanding the data, if there's any PI information in there, and doing more filtering on unstructured data for those LLMs.
So I love that you said risk assessment. So the way I also look at it, one of the parts of the question I think you asked was around speed and making sure we don't slow things down. I like the idea of you do a fairly fast risk assessment upfront for a new solution that comes in, realizing that you're not going to know the full picture necessarily until you actually start piloting, until you start actually testing and validating in a real setting. Because it's just the nature of the beast with some of these AI models is exactly that. But doing a quick risk assessment to understand, are we willing to potentially expose the organization to that risk, whether it's a bias risk or anything of the sort, but start that process, agree from the business side that yes, we are willing to commit to this, and then as you're testing, if it gets too risky during testing, then back out and go, okay, we're gonna pause that one. It's beyond the risk profile we agreed to, and then move on. But you have to be fast, right? You have to start that assessment, do the assessment quickly with the business, not just IT, InfoSec, but with the business saying, yes, we can accept that risk profile, and then get going.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I know, Susan, it looks like you have a follow-up too, but I think that really also draws out another point of kind of digital transformation and how transformed organizations are, because I think the standard whenever kind of going after an analytics project is you think about feasibility. So you do a feasibility assessment and then what's the return on investment, right? So what's the benefit to doing it? I think the companies that are more advanced, and I think it's an integral part of doing data and analytics, is understanding also that risk and evaluating it before you go after the endeavor. I think that's key.
That's exactly what I said. When we do the business part for governance, we actually submit it to our governance function to have an approval before even we can pilot or we can go to the POC. So actually have it at all stages. You do it at pilot, at POC, and to go GA. You have to have that governance approval. So that's how critical it's become.
Yeah. Susan, did you have something that you wanted to drop in here? Okay, it looked like you were excited. I will say too, something I want to kind of draw out throughout the conversation is how do we build out these guardrails without slowing down innovation and development? Because I think whenever people hear governance, they're like, oh, you're just going to police the work that I do, right? And I think that that's a unique risk. Another unique risk with AI is model draft, bias, hallucinations. And so I want to hear from you guys. What's an effective way that you've evolved your governance frameworks to account for some of these risks? Susan?
Yeah, so it's no longer just about monitoring databases, it's about monitoring the data. And observability for us is setting those rules, those data quality rules, and observing it for when things go above the max value, when it goes below the min value. So when you're starting to violate some of those business rules, you're getting real-time alerts as to, hey, this data is starting to drift. We're also doing things like monitoring when PI information seeps into a model. When the data degrades, we'll alert people, and then bringing them into a familiar platform like your Microsoft chats or your Slack channels to start collaborating and looking at what's going on with that model. And so making it easy for them to do that real-time analysis without going through a big process and a big workflow, just collaborating on that data and catching it quickly right when the data starts to drift.
Yeah, I love that. Julia, what do you think?
Yeah, for us, it's actually become an operational reality. So again, it is thinking about everything differently. Observability tools are number one thing that we use. But another thing to add is we use a lot the human in the loop. So we really want to make sure that for us, a lot of these use cases are for our clients. So we want to make sure that everything is tested. We want to make sure that, especially for those critical use cases that have a lot of sensitive information as well, that those are being reviewed by SMEs, by the human in the loop structure. So every single time that we talk about anything that we're developing, it's definitely, that's the number one thing that we talk about.
Yeah,
I think one thing, as you mentioned, was the question of hallucinations, right? So one of the things that I end up having to do these days is to go around and teach non-technical folks about what AI is, what AI does or doesn't do, how it works, those kinds of things, without getting technical, which is sometimes really hard. I think many of you are pretty technical, and so it's just one of these things where some folks don't understand or don't have that background to understand it. But the quintessential key of modern day machine learning based or Gen AI based systems are that they are never 100%. And I think that in this group, we probably pretty much everyone here understands that, right? Is that they are never 100%, and we understand that, and we are okay with that. But when we're dealing with, like, I'm in the healthcare space, and so there's a lot of human interaction. You know, there's a big trust in people giving advice, people giving guidance, whether it's physicians or care partners giving guidance that they might not be even 70% correct. And we tend to be okay with that. But then when machine systems, when AI systems are 99.9% correct, and that 0.1% they're wrong, we seem to throw our hands up going, oh my God, what's going on? This is the worst thing in the world. We need to keep understanding that as we are dealing with these non-deterministic systems, usually, they will hallucinate to a certain point because that is really just that probability matrix coming through. And I'm sorry, seeping some terms in there. But we need to understand that these things are acceptable in the vast majority of cases, but not quite all cases. There are some situations where you might do a risk assessment and go, this non-deterministic system is probably not the right solution, and we need something that is 100% deterministic, non-machine learning based. There are cases that do lend themselves to that situation, and we need to be okay with that too. Just because it's not AI doesn't mean it's bad. Yeah. Bias was mentioned, right? Yeah. And bias is one of these things that always irks me, because how do you measure bias? Does anybody have a metric that actually accurately, definitively measures bias? Not unless you're experimenting. It's really during testing that you identify that, well, there was bias that caused downstream error, right? And so it's one of these things that is very hard to measure, but we always talk about it. Mm-hmm. And we always want to make sure to account for it. And so with data governance, the kind of data that you train the models with, the kind of data you test it with, representative data sets, these are all critical key things that we have to take into account. And I know I've been talking a lot, but one thing to close on that one is, I'm going to say this as an ironic statement. The better your data governance becomes over time, the more you will cause model drift. Because as you clean up your source data, your model that was trained on the non-clean data will not necessarily be able to account for it. And so you need to continue to work together with both the data governance that is cleaning your data, cleaning your source, and your AI governance that's measuring the outcomes and understanding that the two do influence each other as you evolve those models.
I like that. All good stuff. And I think I really loved that you gave that example because it shows us that sometimes humans trust other humans, right, innately, and it's easier to trust another human than it is to trust a machine or a system. Maybe that's happening less now that, you know, AI adoption is evolving. And I think the biggest key in like scaling the trust is having those frameworks in place. That's really how you build trust over time, to tell people, like, we might not be doing it perfectly right now, but we have a system in place and we have frameworks that we're going to abide by to make sure that we're scaling trust across it. I think that's all great stuff. Okay, this is a little bit of a nuanced question. Where are you seeing success with automation? Things like thinking maybe role-based access, real-time monitoring, which we're doing some of, to enforce governance at scale. Susan, did you want to take that one first?
So I think it kind of flows into a little bit about what you were saying too, but we're seeing more guardian agents that are coming out. So ensuring that everything is staying on track. And when you map those guardian agents back to your overall AI strategy and what you accept in terms of bias as an organization, it helps you stay away from arbitrary comments and thinking on whether this data is biased or not, right? So you have to get good at covering yourself as well as communicating what you accept from a company. And I'm sure the healthcare, you really have to be concerned about that. Again, it's using AI for AI, right? So we're using our AI to communicate on our behalf with guardian agents to help make sure that everything stays on the rails according to the threshold that you're setting as an organization.
I love that, stays on the rails, because governance is really putting those guardrails to enable people to develop AI solutions responsibly. Julia, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think as a company, especially companies that have a lot of data, you have to think about your data organization. And I think your baseline is everything. So I'll tell you guys a little bit of kind of a story of us. We grew a lot through acquisitions. So we would acquire different payroll companies in the world and in the US, and we would acquire a lot of data with that. So a couple of years ago, we actually, before AI journey, we started centralizing our data on one platform. And for us, it's actually been revolutionary. And I think that's probably the number one advice that I would give to any companies that have data and that sit on a big chunk of it. Because after that, that's where you could build from then on. So role-based access, anything else, those are different layers of more advanced governance. But I think if you don't have that right foundation to start, that's really the difficulty, to be more sophisticated. So I would start with the basics. So yeah, back to the basics.
Yeah, I love that. I love that governance is layered and you don't have to have it all fully fledged out before you start to enable it and roll it out to your organization. So I love that. I especially for us as we're formalizing our governance program, that's something to think about, that it's layered, and then we can do it in a phased approach. So thank you for that. I think, like I said before, that throughout this conversation, we've realized that governance is innately a people role, right? Like you're having to enable people, empower people to do the right things with data and AI. So I want to hear from you guys, what organizational strategies, like new roles, incentives, maybe new team structures, have helped you guys scale governance across functions? Julia, what's your take on that?
Yeah, tons of different roles, and I'm glad you asked me that, because I was actually part of our Gen AI inception at ADP. So I'm glad to say that I got to see it at the early stages, and again, for everyone it was new because no one knew that. We actually hired lots of very smart consultants and said, "Hey, how do you do this?" And they said, "Well, we don't know, so let's do it together." And afterwards, we actually said, "You know what? Let's try to get our subject matter experts, and let's try to actually create some of these new structures that would help us be successful in Gen AI." So what we do today is we actually have a hub and spoke model, and especially when it comes to governance. So we have a governance structure that sets out rules, that selects different tools that we'll be using, that, as I mentioned before, participate in the approval of new Gen AI use cases. So with that being said, the hub sets out those rules, and then the spokes, some of the business units or other subject matter experts in the business, they actually execute that within that framework. So I would say that that's been successful. At first, it was very manual. At first, it was very difficult to get that organization started. But as we evolved, I think really things have changed, and that's the roles and the new structures that we've created.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's also a key in making sure that you don't slow down innovation and development with your governance frameworks, is to enable it across the organization, federate it, right? Have a hub and spoke model so that everybody is responsible and you don't have a centralized kind of governance capacity where it's like they're policing every single thing. And I really do think that that is the key to speed. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, I like what you talk about, the hub and spoke model and the way you're involving all different groups that are involved there. I would say two sides of the coin. One is the core quintessential software development team needs to fundamentally change. And a lot of us talk about, you have a data scientist, you have a data engineer, you have a software engineer, you have an ML engineer. All these things the lines start to blur, and they should blur. And in my mind, the way that I see these teams kind of evolving over time is that you have not just simply a hybrid team with a whole bunch of different SMEs in different areas, but those SMEs become singular people. They become unified in that regard, that your ML engineer understands data science, understands data itself, understands how to write software as well. You start to evolve those kinds of roles beyond just you have individual SMEs in those areas, even though you might still have more the higher level thinking individuals that do have that expertise, but also your product ownership evolves, it changes. What you traditionally had as a product manager or a product designer is not the same anymore. The product manager has to become more technical, has to become more in the weeds of understanding what are these systems actually doing more behind the scenes, not just topically. Yep. And so they become more integral in that space of planning these things. And then as you build these solutions, how do you get them adopted in the ecosystem? And with the hub and spoke mindset, I also like to add change champions. So across your organization, so at Wellstar, it was 32,000 employees. That's a lot of different teams. A lot of different teams, a lot of different types of teams, a lot of different kinds of individuals, a lot of different roles, different mindsets, different focuses. But they all play a part in a lot of these solutions. Not everyone can play a part in every solution, but as you roll out a solution, how do you get adoption to be successful? Change champions within the respective business units that are on the ground with their respective departments, their respective teams, working on upskilling, working on education, working on gathering feedback, and bringing that feedback up to the hub for them to understand, hey, we need to evolve these things. Especially when you're dealing with Gen AI and prompts and everything, and people going, well, how do I structure a prompt to do something? Okay, let's talk about it. Let's deep dive into these things. But you can't just have IT going and teaching everybody how to do these things. I tried, it didn't work for me. You've got to have those change champions on the ground that are a little bit more upskilled, that are able to help and able to send out that message for you.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, that brings another point to kind of your governance framework, is that data and AI literacy is such a core component of it. And I think somebody from the periphery kind of thinking about building out a governance program maybe overlooks that a little bit, right? Because they're so focused on model drift, AI accuracy, right? Trustworthiness, compliance, security, all those things that you understand as a core part of governance. But data and AI literacy, I think, is such a key component. And I think the champions, we have that too at Carter's. Those are the people that are driving that literacy app, right? That are enabling people. Okay, so speed round. I love this one. I want you guys in one sentence, if you can. What is one mindset or practice that every organization needs to adopt to keep governance aligned with the speed of AI? And Susan, I'd love to hear from you first. Oh,
yeah,
I thought you were looking.
I didn't have just one sentence. But I have two words, converge and orchestrate. And I think it goes back to what we've just been talking about. Right now, we have the flutes over here, the trombones over here, and the trumpets over here. And you're all doing those great pillars of data management. You're doing your modeling, you're doing your analysis, you're doing your governance. But it's AI that brings it all together into a song. And you're going to have a song that's really off pitch, if somebody's off pitch. And you're going to have a song that's, beautiful and successful, and it works. Everybody knows that AI is all about the data, and now it's ensuring all those great pillars are still kept in place. We're not bypassing them, but they're working together quicker, faster, embedding them into the build itself. So
You gave me a great visual. I love that. Julia, what about you?
I would definitely say that that's the best analogy. And, these are very fast moving parts. So I think a lot of the things, if I had to say it in one word, is you definitely have to be ready for a lot of change and a lot of things in motion. So you have to be very adaptable and being able to pivot in bringing a lot of these things together, just because what you think today is the solution, tomorrow it might not be. And I think this is what we're seeing every single day on the news, right? We're seeing new companies being started, we're seeing new tools, even in the governance world. So as you adopt something today, it might be outdated in the next 2 weeks. So I think it's, that adaptability and, everything is in motion that you have to consider.
I love that. Everything's in motion. And can you do one sentence?
Of course, one sentence. Just piggybacking off that word of adaptability, I think that's absolutely spot on. And what I would say in the one sentence is, don't wait for your data to be perfect to start an AI project, because it never will be. And so it's, to explain that sentence, because I can't just say one sentence, is in general, we all have massive amounts of data. You're never going to wait for all of your data to be ready to be used, right? You're looking at a specific use case. You focus on that specific portion of the data. Realize that what you have is what you have right now. Continue working through governance to clean it up, make it better and everything is sort. Don't stop that. But start the AI project to start to assess and understand, because new data that comes in will also be dirty. And so if you simply wait until it's perfect and, it's absolutely, everything's labeled, everything is great, we don't have any outliers here, you're never going to get there. You'll never get started. You've got to be fast. Like you said, within 30 minutes, it evolves and now the next thing. Right? You can't wait. You can't be stuck in the past. Your old model of you're going to go through 6 months of contract negotiation about a project and planning and thinking and then start, you're already too late.
Yep.
It's already obsolete. Plan it, check your risk, validate it. You got enough data to start. If you get to a pilot and you get stuck and it breaks, okay, fine, move on. But start. Don't wait.
100%. I love that. Yep. You got to be agile. I love that. I think you guys did an amazing job of making governance fun. I think sometimes governance can, again, sound kind of boring, and it's all about guardrails and policing data, policing innovation. And I think throughout this conversation, you guys have really drawn out that it's not about that. It's about enabling people and organizations to do the right thing with data, to innovate, go fast, but do it responsibly. So thank you guys so much. I'm so glad that you guys joined us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.